So now I will give the floor to Daniel Zimmer. Daniel is from Climate KIC. He's going to present the WASAG financing framework, which is the main output of the WASAG financing group. He's the director for sustainable land use theme at Climate KIC, which he joined in 2010 as a director for innovation, and he developed and supervised the implementation of the portfolio of innovative projects aiming to accelerate the transition to low carbon and climate resilience economy. I think the working group under the leadership of Daniel has developed a very interesting framework, and that's I mean, we are keen to see that further developed and implemented, and that's really the objective of this working group and of WASAG in general is to develop tools for the countries to use, countries and organizations to use. So this tool could be a very, we hope, very useful for our client countries. So Daniel, floor is yours, 7 to 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you, François. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope, share my screen. Do you see my screen? Yes. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure to introduce this session with the presentation of the work that we have been doing in the past 2 years with a group of partners to the WASAG program on finance, with the ambition to provide guidance or at least some ideas on the possibilities to unlock finance to address water scarcity. This, of course, fits very well with the current agenda, and in particular with the nationally determined contributions that have been proposed. Many of them including activities in the agricultural sector. So if we want to address climate change, we need to find ways to, as mentioned before, create value in order to finance the transformation that are required to achieve the NDCs and also implement the carbon neutrality on this planet. So this working group has engaged a number of people from, as you can see on the right-hand side, the FAO, myself from Climate Kick, the World Bank, IFAD, and OECD. So we wanted to share our experiences on how to attract funding, attract finance, but also our task was to provide the other working groups of WASAG to get funding for their projects, and this is still work that is in progress at the moment. But we have, in the past 2 years, developed a framework, or at least guidance on what is important for those who are trying to finance their activities. And we came up with this framework that is based on 3 important keywords, which are highlighted here in yellow: value, risks, and trust. And all this, as you can see in the center, is embedded, or at least needs to happen, in order to develop a trustful ecosystem of actors who are able to not only address but share this value, the risks that are associated with the projects or the activities that are undertaken, and to create trust for the project and the activities they are developing. So this triangle with value, risk, and trust is what I will try to describe a bit in greater detail now. So on the side of value, everything starts and was already mentioned with the creation of value. Value can be associated from many different things, like increased production in agriculture, in energy, in also the provision of ecosystem services. So you can also protect areas, protect against erosion, increase the resilience of entire systems, sequestrate carbon. All these create value, and we can notice that the value needs to be identified. Who benefits to this value? It's not always the farmer. It can be the society, it can be a city, it can be a number of other stakeholders. So reclamation of degraded lands can also generate value, and we can also mention the societal value through cultural goods or tourism also that need to be identified. So once the value is identified, you have done only half the way. What is important is to develop then a sort of business model, if I may say, to transform this value in monetary flows. And this is not always easy, and that is where also new approaches are very much required. The second keywords of this framework is risk. We all know that transformation and new projects are associated with new risks. A farmer that is producing in a new way or new crops is facing risks because he doesn't necessarily master all the techniques. He doesn't have necessarily all the inputs. This is just an example, but any transformation in general is associated with a risk. And what we say here is that there is a very important need to understand the different dimensions of the risks and to implement a holistic de-risking approach. Just to use different type of de-risking instruments. It could be financial instruments such as insurances, but it could be other instruments like contractual mechanisms to, for instance, guarantee farmers that they will have the possibility to sell their products. But it could be also de-risking instruments such as resilient practices implemented by the farmers. So we see that in any transformation, all the actors, including the banks and insurance and whatever investors, need to see what their risks are, and de-risking instruments need to be developed in a holistic way. So this is the second, and now the third one is developing trust. And for this, we all know that trust goes with transparency, traceability, reporting instruments, so that the different actors involved understand what is happening, keep track of the progress. And this is really necessary to generate finance, and in particular blended finance, which is the mix of private and public sources of funding. So we need, of course, more and more to go in the direction of blending grants, subsidies, or even carbon credits, debt mechanisms such as concessional loans or green bonds, equity, or private sector participation instruments. All these needs to be the result of the development of the trustful ecosystem that generates value and allow actors to take risks. So this is really the basics of the framework that we have developed, and you can implement it in different systems. This is, for instance, from an example from IFAD, how this can translate, for instance, if the system is a new value chain that you want to develop. There you see the different actors of the supply chain, but around this there are banks, there are insurers, there are maybe guarantee mechanisms. And so what we can say about this is that, well, of course you have the keywords already that I just developed that need to be implemented. But it's very important in that case, for instance, to ensure that the practices implemented by the farmers are sustainable, are resilient. The market pull mechanisms are also essential. And so there is a need also maybe of contractual mechanism or different arrangements to ensure that there is a market for the products. And also what is interesting with the value chain is that if any of the actors implement a de-risking approach, then all the value chain actors benefit from that de-risking approach. This will probably be also further illustrated in the case studies later. And then the final aspects that we started to work on, it's just still, I would say, work in progress. It's the time development. How do you orchestrate the progressive de-risking of any project over time? And this graph is just to show that you can, in a generic way, distinguish different phases in the development of projects. You start really with small things on the ground, which are supported mostly by grants. You initiate your project, mobilize your stakeholders, create this trustful environment. In the second phase, you pilot, you validate, you start really planning for the scaling phase, which will be the third phase of the project. After this second phase, the de-risking of the project needs to be sufficient, meaning that there is sufficient trust in the value that can be created in the de-risking mechanisms implemented on the ground, so that the project becomes bankable or investable, so that scaling mechanism can be implemented with cumulative resource mobilization that is progressively increasing in different tranches as explained on this graph. So as I said, this is still work in progress. We are continuing the work at the moment to have different stories for the development of these projects. I will just recap and say really what is very important from this framework is to identify who benefits from the created value, to know in fact what can be extracted in monetary terms, and see also who should pay for the value that is created. The creation of a trustful ecosystem of stakeholders is also something essential. And then overcoming the risks associated with transformation, with new solutions in a holistic way, is also something essential. So this is, in essence, a number of ideas that came from this exchange and also from the case studies that we analyzed. And with this, I conclude my presentation and I return the floor to François.
Thank you very much, Daniel. This was excellent. And I want to add that Daniel presented the framework, but he's also really implementing it in the projects that are supported by a climate kick. So he's not presenting his own case study, but I'm sure during the Q&A he can also come back on with his own field experience. So now we'll move to the 3 case studies. So time is really running fast as usual. So I will ask the presenters to try to stick to 5 minutes. And now Audrey Neveu from IFAD will take the floor. She is a technical specialist from the Water and Rural Infrastructure at IFAD, based in Rome, Italy. and she will present the case study of Niger. Audrey, floor is, and please share your screen.
Thank you. Can you hear me all right? Okay.
Yes, if you can put the slide full, yes, exactly, thank you.
Thank you, Rosaida. She's helping me out there. So today I'm going to talk about family farming in the context of climate change in Niger. Basically, in Niger, we have a difficult situation where the major recurrent shocks are due to climate change. They are compounded by low productive capacities with the usual difficult access to production factors, inputs, equipment, technologies, advisory services, rural finance, and limited access to markets, which is referring to the pull factor that Daniel was mentioning. The limited access to market is coming also from being isolated, far away from the marketplace. The marketplace being limitedly organized. Next slide, please. Joseida. Thank you. So what we have been putting together in partnership with the government and several different co-financiers, we're talking here about OPEC, we're talking here about Italian cooperation, about the government of Niger, the beneficiaries themselves, Jeff funds, Jeff funding. We are proposing an activity spanning over 6 years to strengthen food and nutrition security, resilience, and access to markets for about a little bit less than 300,000 family farms. We are here talking about 2 million people. Half of them are women. 17% are young people that otherwise are emigrating. So the opportunity here is to recreate a context where youth can see an opportunity to remain and engage in the local rural environment. We're putting together $205 million of blended finance to have an activity covering 30,000 hectares in 22 watersheds in the South Central Agropastoral Strip. And this is an area where the climate change, the impact of climate change, the models are indicating that there will be a drop in crop yields, accompanied by a shrinking of the cropping areas, also affecting the livestock sector, which is essential in this area, in the Sahelian area. So climate change adaptation is absolutely crucial in this context. Next slide, please. Thank you. The approach that is being taken here, and this is a little complex in the sense that it is the result of 40 years of experience, and it is based on it's a local territorial management approach that is focusing on economic development clusters, and I will come back to it. This is where the entry point is focusing on unlocking the pull factor from access to market. And this is represented down of the slide in the orange blob, where you have semi-whole-scale markets that are feeding the urban poles of consumption, but they are fed through rural roads by collection centers that are themselves reaching out to their production basins. And these production basins are within larger watersheds. So there, the economic development cluster is considered the real entry point as the encompassing the overall value chain of all these actors. So through the usual tools of loans and grants, through through loans and the usual loans and grants blend, there are the usual productive activities that are supported: irrigation, rain-fed, livestock productions, and here on the green area, on the green blob, we have a series of actors that are representing, that are stemming from this kind of activities: water user associations, the farmer field schools, management committees for infrastructure, for water infrastructure, for common activities. So all of these groups of people, farmers' organizations overall, are coming together within this context of the production basin, and they are represented in these economic development clusters. In order for these productive activities to be sustainable, there is another set of activities, especially funded by a special program for adaptation of smallholder agriculture that is sponsored by IFAD, that has been since mainstreamed into our own activity, and with the global environmental funding to dedicated supporting activity for natural resource management and soil water conservation, to ensure that the productive activities are done in a sustainable manner in the watersheds that are feeding those economic development clusters. Thereby, we're touching on the direct resilience of smallholder farmers. Now, the key innovation here is on what it takes for these collection centers and the semi-wholesale market to function correctly. There, to give you an understanding of the type of activities, we're talking about economic interest groups that are managing the semi-wholesale markets, which is putting together around the same table cities, the city administration, traders, market service providers, together with representatives of the producers. At a lower scale for collection centers, the structure, the legal structure, is not so much of an economic interest group, but rather cooperatives or unions to deal with the management of those collection centers. Both of them have the HG, the Hadin-Gwewa. Hadin-Gwewa is what is usually referred to as stakeholder platforms. The Hadin-Gwewa is a customary practice that was revived in order to facilitate the discussions, the open discussions around those marketplaces, whether small at collection center or larger at semi-wholesale level. There, what is discussed is. Sorry?
You need to reach a conclusion soon, please.
I'm almost done. I'm almost done. In order to be able to discuss, plan, and foresee the next step for development of the local market. There are also some maintenance groups for the rural roads, information sharing to build transparency on the transport costs that are going beyond the local level up to international level. Here we're talking about the markets between Algeria and Nigeria and Niger. So there is also some international shared infrastructure planning happening that is being facilitated. Last slide, please. The takeaway message from this particular point that I wanted to illustrate, because it's the pull factor from a better access to market. The basic rule would be to work on the existing places, trading places, and the existing processes between traders, and we're not so far off from investing in water because the better feeding of the satellite collection centers at farmers level means that translates in about a third of the family farms that are more secured with reduced lean period by 2 or 3 months, because they are secured in the volume that they can market. So that approach has already been taken up by other partners within the country. It is being scaled up in DIFA, DOSO, and the initial regions. And there, the second level of investment is doubling the volume, the financial volume. So this is where, through the trust created, we are generating financial support system, and we're also piloting new financial tools, but within the existing system. With the National Bank, we're looking into piloting green loans for low carbon, climate-friendly agriculture, and green entrepreneurship. So the initial intervention is facilitating the context, and there we're starting to unlock financing. And with this, I close and I hand you the floor back.
Thank you very much, Audrey. This is a very nice case study, very interesting. And please look at the questions in the chat and the Q&A so that you can prepare for some responses when time comes. And now I will give the floor to my colleague Tuti. So Tuti is a water resources specialist at the World Bank. She works extensively on irrigation and innovative financing strategies for irrigation. She's also working on maximizing finance for development, which is how to leverage basically the commercial financing to complement limited concessional financing. She will present the case of India in the India experience related to micro irrigation value chain. Tuti, floor is yours.
Thank you, Francois. Right, I trust this is working. Am I audible?
Yes, go ahead.
Great. So thank you all for having me here today. My presentation is about how commercial banks and non-banking finance corporations are providing irrigation-specific loans and risk mitigation mechanisms to farmers, but also helping ease cash flow constraints of retailers spread across the vast network of Indian villages. While the examples outlined in my presentation today are specific to micro irrigation, I should mention that these loans are being offered for even larger investments, including farm ponds and minor irrigation tanks. How this fits into this framework is that the values and the products offered used de-risking mechanisms, and the risks were spread out between both the public sector and the private sector. And it helped the farmers as well as the private sector ease its cash flow constraints. Now, over the last 20 years, India has seen massive growth in its total area under micro irrigation. However, its total potential remains vastly untapped. This growth can be primarily attributed to the government subsidy scheme, which, while it served its purpose in the beginning, is now showing diminishing returns. At the current rate of progress, it would take us over 40 years to achieve total micro irrigation potential in India. Now, why does this happen? This happens for two reasons. Subsidies are targeted only at small and marginal holders who, while maybe the larger chunk of Indian farmers farm a very small area, which is only 45% of the total farm area. They also don't have any access to credit and often have to take loans because the subsidy payments are back-ended. The second issue is that even the large holders, when they see a small holder getting a technology for virtually free, they feel there's limited incentive to invest in a technology themselves. So therefore, there is a serious constraint of cash flow at the field level. Despite these issues, certain implementation channels have begun to take more concrete form in addition to grants and subsidies. A vast number of OEM and integrators and retailers are implementing models where they charge a monthly fee for utilization until the total payment is recouped. Some are cash and carry, which are rental models, which have a pay-as-you-go utilization, which is more applicable to sprinkler and mobile drip irrigation systems. In very few cases in India, we have noticed where farmers who have enough cash flow availability make a down payment and have outright acquisition of the asset. This also includes a huge component of awareness. What's emerging in India are two solutions. One is commercial banks and the other is non-banking finance corporations. Now, commercial banks are helping tackle the issue of cash flow availability and access to credit in the form of small loans. These, however, come at a high cost and are not irrigation-specific products. So because they're not irrigation-specific products, there's a very simple transaction between the banker and the farmer. There's really no technical backing. Fintech, however, is developing products that help banks better hedge their risk and provide interest at lower rates because they know what the risk of default is. These fintech tools are using hidden data points such as consumers' prepaid mobile money history or utility bills. There is, however, a data privacy element to it, and we should stress that this must be voluntary. The non-banking finance corporation market is something that we're very interested in, as it sort of took shape about 6 to 7 years ago, and it has already reached out to over 2 lakh farmers in India. And one of the things about this is that it caters to the entire value chain of micro irrigation. If you have dealers in rural areas who haven't collected payments from farmers, they will give you dealer financing options. It also offers it offers farmers the ability to do subsidy and margin financing, so they don't have to go to a loan shark, as well as cash entrapment. So the range of these products have catered to various farmers and have shown very promising success over the past 5 to 6 years. Should also mention that they're financially more sustainable because in addition to having a loan servicing representative, they also have a technical agency field officer. This serves the purpose of, in what Daniel referred to in his framework, as building trust, because you understand the product better. There is servicing and there's an operations and maintenance component. So this is something that we should watch out for, this space. I should mention that in the 2 non-banking finance corporations that we studied in India, there was increasing investment from equity investors, but the cost of capital is still high because the perception about irrigation and farmers is that it's a high-risk loan market. So the key lessons for us here were, there are vast infrastructure needs in India, and public finances alone will be insufficient to cater to these. We've also learned that smallholders and large holders have very different needs. Some need a subsidy, some need a credit, some might even need a grant. What the commercial and the non-banking finance markets do is that they help you transition from a beneficiary to a consumer to a customer, which ultimately takes us on a journey of improved service delivery, but also improved value of the product that you're using, an underlying resource, which is a hugely important asset. There is improved technical oversight in much needed infrastructure and data privacy, hand-holding for O&M, and site inspections. These products help not only the farmer, but help enable the entire value chain, which is also key to ensuring that there is seamless service delivery. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. I hope this was useful.
Thank you so much, Tuti. This was an excellent presentation. Now we will move to the 3rd case study, which is from Italy. And I will give the floor to Raffaella Zuccaro from CREA. The title of the presentation is The Adaptation of Agricultural Sector to Climate Change, the Italian Experience. Raffaella is a senior researcher at the Council for Agricultural Research and Agricultural Economy Analysis, CREA. So Raffaella, floor is yours.
Thank you, Francois, and good morning and good afternoon to Good night to everybody. As Francois was saying, the case study that I will present refers to the Italian experience in financing a program to help the Italian agricultural sector to adapt to climate change. As everybody knows, the climate change impacts water availability and create direct and indirect effects on economic development, environmental preservation, and social stability. Also in Italy, during the last decade, we had to face with drought problems that affected not only the south of Italy, where here is a structural problem, but also the center and north. The solution to cope with these problems was identified in financing the National Rural Development Program. This is a program that is co-financed by national funds and the European Union funds. This program provides a measure for irrigation investment and a measure concerning the insurance system. The aim of the program was to build trust in the socio-economic system and creating value to induce a virtuous circle of development. With respect to investment, a grant was identified as a financial mechanism, and it was following an integrated approach because they were selected projects able to guarantee economic, environmental, and social sustainability, and also satisfying specific territorial needs. This was possible identifying specific selection criteria that were designed for this aim. The financial model that was adopted involved several actors, national institutions like Ministry of Agriculture, Ministry of Environment and Regions, the European Commission, the river basin management authorities, that are the planning authorities in EU, and the local association for water management. To coordinate all these actors, it was established the steering committee. The beneficiaries were identified in the local association for water management, the consortia, and not in the single farmers, because here in Italy they manage the collective irrigation. With this program were financed almost 50 projects. The beneficiaries were 29 consortia, but we could reach 250,000 farms. Were involved 14 regions in Italy, and also the output with respect to the environmental output was very good because the potential water saving reached with this program was about 234 million cubic meters saved. The actions financed were mostly related to the modernization of the existing infrastructure network that is managed by the consortia. Were involved 1,300 kilometers of irrigation networks and also 530,000 hectares of irrigated area that became more efficient with respect to the use of irrigation water. All projects that were financed are value chain projects, as they are defined at the beginning of this webinar, as they aim to increase the efficiency in water uses, increase the resilience and the protection to climate change, enhance water efficiency, increase water storage, and promote non-conventional water supply sources. To conclude, these national and European Union funds for rural development present a combination of tools that can help to reach many objectives. The fund for investment, they can help to fostering the competitiveness of agriculture and ensuring, in the meantime, the sustainable management of water for agriculture. Funds for assurance are the risking tools for farmers, and in addition, the regional funds that are related to this program can finance market reinforcement mechanisms. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Rafaela. So we are a bit late, but I just wanted to make justice to all the presenters for these very interesting presentations. And by the way, Rafaela wins the prize of the shortest delivery. So we now move to the Q&A, and we have received a lot of excellent questions in the Q&A. I want to first give the floor to Daniel. And Daniel, there is one question really of interest, I think, is about how to implement the frameworks through a series of projects and how to work on resource mobilization. But you might take also on other questions. So floor is yours. Maybe you can pick from your own experience or respond more generally up to you. Thank you.
Indeed, thank you, Francois. I will be short. And just to say that you can also ask your questions also directly and in the chat, or what we will respond to these questions. Yeah, the framework we have started to, and we have learned how to implement it in a project in Tanzania that is now being scaled also in other African countries, where we are working with smallholder farmers and farmers, men and women, because I've seen this question also of the importance of women. It's indeed something extremely important, and we work. The challenge that we try to tackle is how to reach really the smallholders, less than 1 hectare farmers, and make them credit worthy with their local private bank using guarantee mechanism, insurance mechanisms that are blended. So it's a blended de-risking financial instrument. And we have learned that indeed we need a holistic de-risking mechanism and approach, because only these financial tools are not sufficient. There are still a lot of risks that the farmers are facing on the ground, the smallholder farmers. So the smaller you are, in a way, what we are learning, the more risky it is also for you, and the more you need to be protected in order to engage in a virtuous spiral of development. I won't say much more, but this is really what we have learned is the importance of the creation of an ecosystem with all value chain actors involved, and ensure that the value is shared, the risks are understood and shared and mitigated, and then of course the creation of trust in this ecosystem. So we are replicating this at the moment in different African countries. I've seen some question about the role of commercial banks, for instance, commercial finance. I think if we are able to implement small loan working capital, then the local commercial banks can have a role, because they are also close to the smallholder farmers. And provided the de-risking instruments are implemented nationally with the governments, then you can also use these local mechanisms to finance small loans to the farmers. So just quick insights. I leave the floor to the others.
Yeah, thank you very much, Daniel. So Audrey, can you take the floor, and maybe you can come back a bit on this question on commercial finance in Niger, to explain how much of commercial finance was leveraged by the program. So there were some questions on women and youth participation to the program. So I saw that you had a very good rate of women participation in Niger. I mean, and you can pick on any other question, just make sure to be short, because we are really time constrained now. Thank you. Audrey, over to you.
Okay. Sorry, I did not see the question on women. I'm in the Q&A section, but with regard to the commercial banks, this is now the initial work, because there is enough trust in the system so that they accept to engage. But it's like a new business. It's all the challenge with the commercial bank is how, and that was illustrated in Stuti's case study. You need to add the technical dimension to the money management, to the management of just to make sure, to assure the banker, the financial guy, that technically it is sound and you will have a return on the investment. So that's this duality that is the challenge, really. And that is what we're working on a pilot phase, just to see if we can manage, if we do master now enough the technical dimensions throughout, thanks to our prior experience, so that it can be taken on board as a new bank product. So we'll see. For now, if I say the amount, it will not be very convincing. We're talking $1 million. So it is not convincing, but the door has now opened, and before it was closed, which is already a first step. So that's a first challenge. I wanted to come back to what Danielle was saying just before, because I think that this building of trust, to have a first iteration, to find what are the list of activities on the ground that you need to de-risk, facilitate trust, and then accept, go to reach out to more stakeholders to get the proper financing for this set. What we're struggling now in the framework is how many iteration of that you need to do to go at larger geographic scale. This is where you can start at farm level, and we do have examples around the world to document different types of situations. But when you start growing up at scale, there is you get different stakeholders to the green bonds, etc. So this is where you can plug in different actors, and that is interesting. But how to organize or to conceptualize that is the challenge we're facing right now.
Thank you very much. Indeed, I think Niger is a very nice example of aggregation and trying to get to scale. So Stuti, I will give you the floor. I mean, there were some specific questions for you, or you can pick on anything. Just give you a very short time. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. Stuti, floor is yours.
I won't say much. I've answered a few questions already, but I'll invite any member of the audience to reach out to us, through the WASAG website with any questions they have, and we promise to respond in as much detail as we are able, including share more detail on the case studies. I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. And Rafaela, maybe you can come in. There were some questions on, remuneration of ecosystem services and how to produce more food with less water. So maybe you can take on that, or any other questions that you want to take on.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Well, there were some questions on the remuneration of ecosystem services, which I think is kind of what the objective you have. Producing more food with less water.
Yes. With respect to the program, actually, we did not finance it also. We did not provided subsidies for farmers producing ecosystem services. But as you know, in the European Union, the program for rural development in general are studying the way to give an economic value to ecosystem services, to give this money to farmers that produce them. Right now, at least in Italy, we don't compensate farmers for this production. So we're studying on it for the next programming session.
Okay, thank you. So is there any additional response that any of the panelists want to make before we move to the closing?
Oh, it's okay.
Daniel?
No, I think we need to come to a close now in the remarks, and we will respond to the questions later.
Okay, very much. So thank you very much. So I will give the floor to Ms. Sasha Kushima for the closing remarks. She's the Deputy Director, Land and Water Division at the Food and Agriculture Organization. Sasha, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Francois. Can you all hear me okay? Well, thank you very much for, okay, thank you. Dear colleagues and WASAG partners, it's been a great pleasure for me to listen to all the wonderful presentation today. And on behalf of FAO, I would like to thank all the excellent speakers and also the rigorous questions presented in the investment framework for enhancing agricultural water. This is a very important part of not only WASAG work and our collective approach to enhance government investment in this area for agriculture and especially irrigation and also water services. At FAO, we've been working with smallholder farmers. It is a key in our approach in various facets of hand-in-hand initiative. I don't know if you all heard of this new one. It is related to tackling vulnerabilities in exactly some of the presentations made today on access to markets, access to investments, and how do we gather smallholder data. We also work with the platform called the World Agriculture Watch at FAO that is promoting access for smallholders on various data collection on their needs at the social level, but also economic development level. So we look forward to work with all the partners here to promote access to assets, the public goods, the social services, research extension, and also the technologies. And main thing that FAO, we work with our member states, so prioritize public investments and encourage private investment in the blended finance is a key in our approach at our division of land and water, but also throughout our technical cooperation and investment center. So in support of smallholder investments, among others, are the issues raised in water management, sustainable management of also the inputs, the genetic and food sources, soil conservation is also part of our work here, and also in our hand-in-hand initiative, finding the market access infrastructure and all the energy related and pre-harvesting and post-harvesting needs. So we would like to work with the partners here as we move with our next important event that we're organizing with the OECD is the Roundtable for Agriculture Water Investment. We have participated in the G20s in raising this issue of financing in agricultural water, and we will continue to do so with some of the key governments in this area. And I thank all the partners in contributing to this discourse and move the needle forward. So with that, I'd like to conclude and thank again to all the great efforts, and I look forward to your next steps and potentially working together for a broader impact. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Sasha. And so it's my duty to invite all the participants to the next WASAG webinar, which will be held on June 15 from 15 hours to 16 hours European time. And it's about collaboration on promoting quinoa. So that's a more specific subject, and it's part one of it. Also, again, the link to the webinar and the materials will be sent to you. So really feel free, and you are incentivized to reach out to the team and to the financing group members for any more questions. This is, this was a bit rushed, but the idea is to keep it in 1 hour because we all have very limited times for this kind of knowledge management activities. But it's really just an appetizer, and of course, the real work is by then exchanging and having a bilateral discussions on projects and on specific experiences. So I would just encourage you to reach out to the team and go to the WhatsApp website, etc., to learn more. And with that, this webinar is closed. Thank you again. good day, good evening, good night.